Hey everybody, it is the System Failure Podcast number 32.
Hey Brian, number 32. We're starting to get up there. I'm pretty excited to pass that 50 milestone. I really feel like we're going to be consummate podcasters once we hit 50. And once we get to 100, I'm sure we'll have the number one podcast in the world.
Well, Joe Rogan was saying it took 5 years for his podcast to become profitable, so maybe we can beat that.
We're almost done with the year number one here. It's coming back to summer, and we started last summer. So, it ain't like, it ain't like it ain't like we're not starting to mature as a pod. Oof, easy for me to say.
Time sure flies by. Yeah. That's hard to believe, but yeah, it's happened.
Well, last week we were all in a kerfuffle because we were recording the pod during the breaking news about Iran's launch of drones and missiles at Israel. As you may recall, Brian, there was much excitement and electricity and charge in the air over the imminent prospect of World War III.
Well, the price of my Bitcoin, I took a catastrophic financial hit, but it's since recovered.
Well, it's crawled back a little bit, though, eh?
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. And we have a lot more to say on Bitcoin later in the pod, so keep your seatbelt buckled, listeners.
Well, it's just it, right? It's proved to not be World War III at all.
Yeah,
it's just the status quo as usual.
Yeah. All right. So to punctuate this discussion of the fake World War III we were treated to last weekend, I totally fell for it. I was like, oh, man, because I had this feeling of climax. I think a lot of people probably do. In fact, I should dare to venture that if you're listening to a podcast called System Failure, why you might be sympathetic to the idea. And so I was like, watching Bitcoin crash and then trying to figure out what's going on. Flipping over the news was a heady experience, to say the least. But the details coming out this week are that the Biden administration had a 10-day heads up that they had taken careful. I was reading this Sunday is Sunday, April the 21st, and today is Wall Street Journal. They had the main article in today's edition of the Wall Street Journal details the behind-the-scenes preparations by the Biden administration for the Iranian attack of last week. And I did see some clips on the newspaper or on from the press, generally speaking, that we were expecting an attack by Iran on Israel. Like, I saw a few blurbs about that, but it wasn't until Sunday that it seemed like it was really happening. But yeah, as it turns out, the whole thing is entirely performative, and we're all just being strung along by this elite class, and we just don't have any inside understanding of what's happening, and we're just left to kind of flap in the breeze like a torn and tattered flag. Well, this whole business of a fake war being prosecuted by the elites and of us plebes having to just kind of keep up to try to not react too emotionally to the news, knowing it's all curated and all fake, reminds me of that famous quote from George Orwell's 1984, which I should now like to read into the microphone for your pleasure, Brian.
Please.
You'll know the quote, right? The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. Hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. This new version is the past, and no different past can ever have existed. In principle, the war effort is always planned to keep society on the brink of starvation. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects, and its object is not victory over either Eurasia or East Asia, but to keep the very structure of society intact. And I think that's really what was happening last weekend with this curated Iranian attack on Israel, and then like the curated Israel is going to strike back, but it's all going to be managed. Israel's going to do a strike back so they can save face, but in a way that's not going to require the Iranians to do another counter-strike. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And more to the point, I feel shame and regret that I was taken in by all the excitement last Sunday. So, man, it makes me think of watching that film Oppenheimer, and that film was so uncomfortable, at least for me, because I interpret the entire thing as a class war. It's no coincidence that Oppenheimer got swept up into the mad world of McCarthyism and communist accusations and the Red Scare after the bomb was dropped, because communism and socialism and the war between capitalism and communism is all has to do with the class structure and trying to abolish the class structure or trying to preserve the class structure. And to me, it really seemed like the atomic bomb it wasn't so much a bomb dropped on the citizens of Japan, although, tens of thousands of people suffered horrible deaths as a result of that. That bomb was dropped so that as a maneuver in the chessboard of dividing up Europe with the Russians. And we also wanted to make sure that we prevented Stalin's imminent invasion of the Japanese mainland, because the U.S. wanted to be the one to receive the Japanese surrender. And the main sticking point was Emperor Hirohito, and whether or not Hirohito would have to submit to the humiliation of a trial. You know, the Shinto religion has the emperor as its god. You know, so this would be like putting like America losing a war and having to put Jesus up on trial. Like, people wouldn't really. There's no way to end a war. But that was the only sticking point in the eve of the dropping of the atomic bombs, and it was so crazy that some of the biggest names in the U.S. opposed the dropping of the atomic bomb. Dwight Eisenhower, General Eisenhower is a prime example. I watching that movie Oppenheimer, to me, I interpreted the whole development and then the deployment of the bomb as a move by the ruling class against the working class of this country, not so much against the Japanese or the Russians, who are the people who are ostensibly, you know, there's a level of the game where this is a bomb dropped on the Japanese, and then there's another level where this is really a bomb dropped for the benefit of a Russian audience, and then there's another level where this is all about keeping the class structure in America intact here, because I do not think the 20th century, or the history, the American 20th century is comprehensible in the least until you remember that our ruling class was terrified by the 1917 Russian Revolution, and even more terrified in the 50s when it turned out that the Soviets were doing really well. Their crappy version of Marxism that they implemented, as crappy as it was still way better than what we had going on in America. You could tell because the Russians were flying Sputnik over our heads in 1955, and they had turned their entire country from a bombed out ruin of a feudal society into an industrial nation competing with the United States in a single generation. Economic results like what the Russians experienced in the first half of the 20th century as the Soviets is unheard of. And I think that the dropping of the atomic bomb fits into that story. And so anyway, that's what I wanted to, the whole week of reading how managed the war was the supposed World War III was last weekend really made me think of George Orwell and 1984.
Well, no one's even going to be talking about this whole Iran business. Well, no one's already talking about it now. We're the only ones doing it. And,
I mean, it's still a major escalation. This is the first time Tehran has actually attacked, Israel, but yeah, you're right. It's going to be a zero at the end of the day.
This is just the ongoing war, although I suppose there's this ongoing war in the Ukraine. I mean, 9/11 was obviously this attack by our political elite on the regular people, which we've talked about before. And we had all kinds of fun, unending wars in the Middle East. So, yeah, I mean, I guess Orwell is he's on to something.
Couldn't we say the Ukraine war fits into, why is America wanting to draw countries into our quote-unquote defensive military alliance all the way up to, why do we want to continue to antagonize the Russians in that way? The reason we're doing that is for corporate welfare. Right? It's much easier to steal money when you first move it abroad, but the money's not really going abroad at all, right? The money is all the Ukraine aid is just going right to Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, and the weapons are going to Ukraine, but not the money. The money state. This is just we just need these are big companies. They need to make profits, so we're just going to continually keep expanding NATO. Right? Isn't there some element of welfare for the super wealthy here in the United States that motivates our relentless expansion, westward expansion of NATO? I think it could fit. You might have to contort it a little bit to fit the shape into the peg into the hole, but I think there's definitely an element to that. It's all about the ruling class. It's all about preserving the class structure of society, as Mr. Orwell so eloquently put it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, I think that puts a little bow on a potential World War III. We'll get back to it next time. We're all hyped up about unsettling developments in the Middle East. But for now, go ahead, Brian. What were you going to say?
Well, Orwell. I mean, the thing is, I don't know if how you want to get into this business. The guy setting himself on fire, but because he talks about Orwell, and he and many of our other venerated artistes, he's claiming are part of some kind of conspiracy by our financial elites to keep us down. Which, his hypothesis that there's a crazy financial ruling class mob, people who are in charge, is obviously true, and that they are. They know that capitalism is unsustainable, so they need to move towards a craven cash grab, and then they can say nuts to everyone else and live in their fascist utopia. But yeah, he's saying like the Simpsons and the Beatles and George Orwell are all pieces of this conspiracy. And, on the one hand, he's claiming that there's this crazy kayfabe going on, which is what we're saying about, the Iran situation. And, I can imagine we're like watching wrestling, like, this has to be real, right? As the Undertaker throws mankind through the top of the cage there.
Right. Last week I was on this pod being like, man, that Undertaker, he sure is a sinister character, eh?
But on the other hand, the guy, he's saying Stanley Kubrick, he's talking about A Clockwork Orange and Doctor Strangelove, which admittedly I haven't seen, but I have seen 2001: A Space Odyssey and Eyes Wide Shut. And
do those movies seem like someone who's trying to keep the darkest secrets of the Hollywood elite? Not really. I don't know if that fits.
So I guess I don't quite know what to make of it all. I mean, I guess my hypothesis would be that, well, they do want you to feel hopeless, but I don't think you have to be as hopeless as they want you to feel. There's still plenty of room to grow as like a person or whatever. Anyway.
So before we unwind this thread too much further, I think we ought to set the table for our venerable listeners. We have no idea when they're going to get to this pod. It could be like, it could be like the year, 26,000 by the time someone's listening to this recording. So let me just set the table. Today is, Sunday, April the 21st. On Friday, April the 19th, a gentleman set himself on fire in New York City, out in front of where the Donald's trial is being held. And, of course, he burned to death. It's not, cover yourself with accelerant and light yourself on fire. That's going to be a tough one to survive, and I don't think he intended to survive. Huh?
He was quite on fire in the footage.
Yeah. But the thing that makes this interesting is that this gentleman left a Substack. It's like Substack is becoming an ever bigger part of society, which excites me to no end. But he left a Substack, which unwinds a whole bunch of conspiracy theories that all begin with the Silicon Valley bank failure in the spring of 2023. And so that gets us into the Bitcoin business that we referenced at the top of the pod. So shall we? So Brian, why don't you? So we should mention that this is a breaking story, and neither you nor me has had and really enough time to go into a deep dive into the specific components of this massive conspiracy that the man has unwound on Substack. But I have had time to read his manifesto and a couple other posts, and the basic intention, Brian, is that the elites are corrupt and that pedophilia is everyone knows in the post-Jeffrey Epstein era that pedophilia and blackmail is a means of political control, and that's what our friend who burnt himself to death on Friday is trying to elucidate. Right now, what are some of the other details of the conspiracy? Right, it involves the 1988 DNC with Slick Willie Clinton. It involves what were you going to say? Bitcoin, yeah. It involves Bitcoin being a massive Ponzi scheme. Right? The punchline to the conspiracy theory is that Bitcoin is a massive Ponzi scheme designed to... that the elite understand that they are running a society that's fundamentally unsustainable. And that is to say that the widening the widening wealth gap, the polarizing of that wealth gap is ultimately so unsustainable that they're going to need some kind of a major event to keep society continuous in the very near future, and that this event is going to be the revelation that Bitcoin is a massive Ponzi scheme, and that all kinds of money, all kinds of people's money, it's just going to be like when an asset inflates in value, you have all this value that's on the books, and then when the bubble bursts, that asset collapses in value and all kinds of value gets wiped off of your balance sheet. And so the notion here, as I understand it, is that Bitcoin is a massive Ponzi scheme that people will not realize they've been stolen from. They will just think that they fell for a Ponzi scheme but really all of our wealth is being stolen as a matter of by the mechanism of this Ponzi scheme. So does that sound about right to you, Brian, based on what you read?
Yeah, I just don't know how much I agree with it. All kinds of money has been made and lost on the Bitcoin on its crazy ebbs and flows already. And like what you don't want to be being a rube and buying Bitcoin at the top. Like you want to buy Bitcoin when everyone hates Bitcoin and not when everyone loves Bitcoin. That's you're begging for it then. So I mean, how many more times is it going to explode and then drop? Like how many more times can it happen? Many more times than like it's happened many more times than seem possible already.
Yeah. That gives everyone great faith. That makes you feel confident to invest in Bitcoin. It makes me feel confident when I invest in Bitcoin. But what if the whole thing's a fugazi? What if those drops and falls are engineered by Bitcoin whales to entice us to invest, to make us feel secure in our investment?
Well, I'm sure that they do. But what happens is the price of Bitcoin gets so low that opinion turns on the price of Bitcoin. And like right now, opinion on Bitcoin is reasonable given its 65K or so price. So I guess is there gonna come a day when like the elites like really pull the switch and be like, all right, well we're going into our bunkers and we're nuking like the rest of the world or some equivalent thereof.
I think some of them think that obviously that can't work out for them, right? That's not gonna. They're on the Titanic with us. There's no exempting yourself from the fate. We are all bound together on our fate, at least until we can develop some kind of interstellar travel. So I don't know. I do worry that like the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and the elites that come out, they don't really seem bright. They just seem like they have money, and I worry that they think they're much brighter than they are because of their bank accounts.
Well, I do think there's a place they can go. They've got like these giant underground bunkers, and and so if they do something like nuke the world or kill off everyone or do something like pull this rug out from us somehow, I mean there is a place for them to go and like.
I don't think Mark Zuckerberg knows how to fix the plumbing in his bunker. I think he's going to rely on an army of servants. And how the question is, once the entire rest of the world is nuked, how do you get your servants to not kill you and take your wife and and all your stuff? I don't know. I think that. It's a crazy apocalyptic scenario, and like who knows what's going to happen. So it's probably not worth speculating about. But I do worry that these people are much more clown tier than I think they have much more power than they do.
That is true. Like, well, there is a thing where Mark Zuckerberg's biggest security guy is going to be the person who's really in charge once that happens.
Right. And Zuckerberg is going to be his bitch, right? That's going to work. Well, look, before we get too far away from our man's conspiracy theory here, and we're going to have to, delve into this more because this is a breaking story.
It's a big topic with a lot of angles.
Yeah. But for me, I had this experience of reading the following article on Coindesk on Monday. So this is 4 days before the man immolated himself in New York. So this article is published on April the 15th. And the man immolated himself on April the 19th. So I guess I can just read the headline, and I'll be sure to post a link to this Coindesk article in the show notes for this episode. The headline is Bitcoin price recovery lacks whale participation, online data show. Blockchain analytics firm Into the Block's large holder net flow indicator shows whales are yet to resume accumulation. So that's exactly what you would expect in a Ponzi scheme, right? The whales seed this investment. They pay out the people who exit the investment vehicle prior to the rug pull. But leading up to the rug pull, right, they stop investing their own money to prop up the Ponzi scheme, right? That is exactly seeing the whales pull back from investing after Bitcoin's dropped to 60 or whatever on the eve of World War III. Seeing them pull back and not halt their inflows to the Bitcoin to Bitcoin generally speaking is really scary, and it's just wild to me to read this man's conspiracy theory a couple days after reading about how the whales aren't reinvesting. So who knows? I mean, let's be real. I got no idea what's going on under the Bitcoin hood. So this is all wild speculation, but we'll have to do, like I said, a deeper dive on our man here and get back to our dear system failure listeners with more details as we uncover them. But boy, did that Coindesk article combined with the Substack the man left raise the hair on the back of my neck.
Well, do you want to make some kind of prediction about the price of Bitcoin? I don't know, 6 months from now?
I think that, here's a prediction. Totally risky out on a limb prediction, but I think that 2024 is going to be something of a climactic year, and because there's a presidential election this year, and because the authority, the institution, like not the Donald or maybe the Don, whatever the powers that be are losing control of the situation. I mean, now you have half the millennials aren't going to be getting a house, and none of the Zoomers are going to be getting a house unless we get that, unless we inherit it. Right? So we're really looking at a tight, plus the wars in Gaza and Ukraine and the movie about a civil war in America coming out. It's just really, the situation is really getting crazy. So if Bitcoin is a part of the system of control and not a reaction and not a revolution against system of control, as I previously assumed, then I have to think that this could be the year that we see some real excitement with Bitcoin. So I think near term it goes up as the Ponzi scheme keeps unwinding. Maybe not as aggressively as it has in the past, but I think we'll see some gradual growth. And then maybe, and I think that we could potentially see something happen in like October or September this fall that's going to heavily disrupt the Bitcoin markets. So I don't know. I think what I'm going to do is unwind my investment here and try to keep my exposure to about 5K, no more than 5K by the time the fall comes around. So I'm going to try to pluck a few more dollars in Bitcoin profits before the whole system goes belly up and I end up as the bag holder. That's my plan.
I guess there is this thing where like Google, when we were first Googling things back in, I don't know, like 2001 or whatever, whenever that was started, it seemed like a good thing.
I think I was on Dogpile in 2001.
All right.
Remember that? Dogpile.com?
Yeah. Well, at some point, Google emerges the clear victor over like Alta Vista. And,
that's like 2002, something like the era you're saying for sure.
And then I got like a Gmail account in high school. I think that must have been like '05 or something. I think I got my...
You remember the exclusive Gmail invites going out?
I do.
Everyone was clamoring for that?
Yeah. And, like Reddit, obviously, we've lamented. It seemed like a great thing at first and became wretched. And so, maybe Bitcoin is one of these things that will turn south. I don't know. It seems really easy to fade the hype on Bitcoin, and I don't know if I'm blinded by my seeming success in investing in the coinage, on which I believe I've mostly made money. It's just really easy to like buy when everyone hates it and then sell when everyone loves it historically.
Yeah, I've had a great 6 to 12 months on Bitcoin, buying when I feel like I should sell and selling when I feel like I should buy. But this does not mean that Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, but I think every Ponzi scheme victim has the exact sentiment that you just articulated. Right? Well, it's done pretty well for me so far. It can't really be a Ponzi scheme, can it? Is it possible that I'm being duped here? Things have gone so well to date. And then, of course, the rug pull comes and...
there was work involved in like buying it like at its low of like 15K last time, and I had to go against some doubters there.
You had to mop some sweat off your brow, did you?
Yeah.
You pushed the buy button.
So it wasn't just like, oh, my money's just going up exponentially without any work at all. So I don't know.
That's true. That's true.
So I guess the jury's. I guess my 6 months prediction here. If they lower interest rates, I think it'll be good for the price of Bitcoin. I guess I don't think it's about to collapse.
Why would lowering rates be good for Bitcoin? Obviously, higher rates would mean... lower rates mean more inflation. So the relative... Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, and people need to park their money somewhere.
But we're talking about... the Fed has now all but extinguished hopes for rate increases this year. So for rate cuts this year, and maybe even left the door open for a rate increase. I think that was the minutes from the Federal Reserve's most recent Federal Open Market Committee meeting. I think that's right. We're really painted into a corner here economically. No matter what the Fed does, we are boned.
Well, I guess this election seems dramatic, although if we are to believe things are like totally kayfabe, and that, to get back to our self-immolating friend here, he's saying that, Trump and Hillary is just like kayfabe and Trump versus the establishment, part of the kayfabe. And so I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it's kayfabe. That they're both rich people, and their interests do intersect to some extent.
They're both happening at the same time, right? We have a dumpster fire, and then we also have a kayfabe that's trying to cover up the dumpster fire, right? The rodeo clown. Woo! Look over here! Do not look at the dumpster fire. And like, I think it definitely seemed like the establishment got caught with their pants down in 2016, right? Like Hillary Clinton, like not campaigning in Michigan, just being, we're good. You know, we can count on the Michiganders. Like, right. I mean, it's just insanity. And, you know, we can just rely on the media to cheat for us. We don't have to do any actual work. Right. I definitely got, and then the breathless paranoia on NPR about the Donald being a secret agent of Moscow that ended my relationship with NPR forever. I remember driving to work the morning after the election, and that was the big theme. Oh man, a Russian asset has been elected president. And it gave me pause. I was like, maybe it's true. But then as the Mueller investigation unwound, I was, this is all complete. That's the kayfabe, right? So I do feel like our man who set himself, let's be real, this is a man who set himself on fire. We have to factor that in. His decision-making tree has led him to that, which I understand, but it does make a statement about the mind that wrote the Substack.
See, the thing about this guy is he's talking about, like, well, he's saying how, like, all the Simpsons writers went to Harvard and that the Simpsons is doing something to our brains. Like, well, he just talks about like the monorail episode where, you know, Marge wants to invest some money in Main Street, but then this slick talking salesman comes in and sells them on this useless monorail. And somehow this is like having an effect on our minds where it makes us give up. And you know, he was saying the same thing about Kubrick, you know, in the aforementioned Clockwork Orange and whatnot. But anyway, but I don't see how these things are like social commentary. And this is just what this guy is doing. Like it sounds like you can say that this guy's part of a psyop or something, the same psyop as the Simpsons, except I guess he set himself on fire.
Yeah, I think that tells you it ain't a psyop, but
well, he's just like exposing the social condition. The things he's saying about the Simpsons and Stanley Kubrick and the Beatles seem like crazy to me. And like I don't know, like this guy setting himself on fire. I mean, see, I wonder like what his state of mind is leading up to this. Is he like a peaceful person doing this, or is he like an enraged person who can't handle the suffering anymore and feels like he has to expose like the elite?
It's got to be B, right? It's got to be B. He can't. What's the name? I forgot the name of the Vietnamese monk who touched himself off. But that man just sat there, you know, in an Indian style position, very calmly. I feel like that dude had real fortitude of mind, and I feel like this may be a little more frantic, a little more desperate, a little more coloring outside the lines, a little more off the rails. Just what you're suggesting with your option B there.
I don't think the way to win the war against our reptilian overlords is to like set yourself on fire and basically succumb to the madness. And so I think it's questionable to that end. And I mean, you want to find your inner peace and I don't know, like not succumb to the madness. So I don't know how I feel about it all, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, Brian, you've been known to make the point that we should try to focus on our opportunities and not focus on all of the defects and things that are wrong with our reality. And I do think that, you know, getting yourself worked up to the point where you set yourself on fire, well, though it's an undeniable strategy, I don't think that's the way to go either. I think we'd ought to all be communicating with each other, and we'd ought to do something like a general strike. Like maybe we could do a move where, like, imagine if for like 1 month, everyone who's renting just decide, we all agree nationwide, everyone who's renting, we're not going to pay bills or go to work for a month. Save up your cans of beans. We're just going to tough out this month. Like the point is, I guess that these people who our man who set himself on fire is talking about, the elites, Bill Clinton and the Donald and Hillary and all these people. Like they have no power at all, really, right? They only have the power that we all collectively agree to give them. And the minute that we all start coordinating with each other, they like the people, like the Ford family, like owns the Ford Motor Company, right? But those people don't know how to put a bumper on a car. They wouldn't know even, you know, they wouldn't know where to start. All they do is collect their paycheck from their mailbox once a month or once a quarter and send their proxies to board of directors meetings, right? They have no leverage whatsoever. The people who are actually doing the real work are the ones that have all the leverage and always have. And I think that so much of the divisive media that we're subjected to is designed to make us not realize that. So when I read articles about boomers versus millennials, or men versus women, or trans people versus cis people, that feels like divisive media to me. I think, to your point, The Simpsons and A Clockwork Orange and Dr. Strangelove, and Eyes Wide Shut and 2001 are all reflections of reality, right? These are all real pieces of art trying to reflect what's going on back to us rather than change what's going on by showing us a false reality. So I think this man is like 80% on the ball and then 20% off, like probably we are too, right? And so I think that a lot of the things he's saying, look, well, I wanted to pivot into Bill Maher's monologue from Friday night about pedophiles in Hollywood, and it really, like, this man set himself on fire in New York on Friday afternoon, and then on Friday evening, Bill Maher is taping this special out in Los Angeles for his audience, assuming Bill Maher has no idea about this manifesto. It's interesting timing, but Bill Maher's point was talking about there was a documentary released lately, I have not seen it, about Nickelodeon and all of the child stars like Amanda Bynes that got abused there.
Dan Schneider.
Yeah. I mean,
it is funny that the Nickelodeon logo used to be like a foot, right?
I forgot about that. Yeah. There's so many bizarre sexual things on Nickelodeon. Like, these kids are just... Yeah. We'll now pivot to Bill Maher, but all of this makes the man's manifesto seem like it has actual basis in reality, no question about it. But Bill Maher went on to rope Disney into the pedophile thing. He didn't mention there was some big shot at Disney in the past 10 or 15 years who's gotten arrested for abusing children, but he was focused on how Disney hired executives from Nickelodeon after they'd been they had one guy in particular who had got convicted of child abuse, served his time, got out, and then Disney hired him, knowing this was in his past. So Bill Maher calling out Nickelodeon and Disney for grooming children and abusing them is just really insane. And it fits in with the broader theme of pedophilia. Like, I thought that people that were fucking children would be really, I just would assume my whole life it would be really rare that someone would do that, just the occasional crazy person. But it turns out that at the top of every dominance hierarchy, religion, entertainment, sports, politics, is this system of control where people are fucking children, and then the pictures or videos of that are used to control them, so to make sure they march in lockstep with the demands of the elite.
Well, it's good to hear Bill Maher addressing the issue head on.
Yeah.
Although it is funny that Bill Maher was interviewing Roseanne Barr and she was talking about MK Ultra, and Bill Maher was like, "What is MK Ultra?"
Of course, Bill Maher knows about MK Ultra, right? How could you not know about MK Ultra? It's like, if you want to talk about the quintessential, the classic Wikipedia rabbit hole, starting at MK Ultra is great. That'll lead you to Operation Nightingale and Midnight Climax and Mockingbird and all these other Operation what's the one where the Joint Chiefs wanted to hijack planes, crash them into American targets, and blame it all on Fidel Castro? Operation Northwoods.
Right.
You can just, all of this got declassified in the 70s and 80s. We haven't got much fodder since the Church and Pike committee hearings in the 70s. And I think a lot of people just assumed that CIA and the intelligence apparatus just stopped doing these insane things, but I'm sure they've been carrying on as ever behind the scenes. And Bill Maher's monologue really made it hard to believe that Maher is not aware of the history of CIA. I mean, it's like, what's going on? So it was pretty interesting to see this. For the longest time, no one wanted, in the aftermath of the Pizzagate thing, no one wanted to talk about the fact that the entertainment, politics, sports, all of it has religion, all of it has pedophiles at the top.
Alt-right conspiracy theory.
Right. It was just it was unmentionable. But now it turns a lot of the COVID conspiracy theories turned out to be true. It's like conspiracy theorists must be getting tired of being right all the time. Well, Bill Maher's monologue about victimizing children really leads us into the next topic here, which is Tucker Carlson's recent appearance on Joe Rogan, right? This is the one you wanted to bring up, Brian. And Tucker Carlson had two interesting things. Really, they're both one topic, and that's UFOs. And his version of the UFO phenomenon is that this is UFOs and then angels and demons are one and the same thing, right? The lights in the sky, the wheel of Ezekiel, the phenomenon over Nuremberg in 1561 or whatever that was. All of these things, the lights in the sky used to be interpreted with a religious context when we were a religious society, but now that we're a secular sci-fi society, we interpret the lights in the sky with a sci-fi secular sort of bent. And so that, I think, was the main, at least the beginning of the 3-hour marathon with Rogan was devoted to that, the UFOs. So did you have any comments about Mr. Tucker and Mr. Rogan's interview, Brian?
Well, one thing Tucker was saying is that prior to 1945, everyone just believed that the lights in the sky were the aforementioned angels and demons.
Yeah.
And with the advent of the nuclear bomb, I guess it went away. I wasn't there in 1945, but certainly in our current paradigm, the angels and demons is not really what is purported as like the possible solution.
Tucker was saying that maybe we really are. He was saying maybe he wasn't saying yes, we definitely are, but he was saying maybe it's true that battle between good and evil that every society has thought of itself as being engaged in since the dawn of time is actually real, and maybe these weird phenomena in the sky there's different factions, like angels and demons. Like there's some benevolent factions and some malevolent factions. Whatever the case may be, we know that our apprehension of reality is incredibly limited. And you start thinking about the temporal dimension, time, the thing you measure with a stopwatch, as being interchangeable with the physical dimension, the thing you measure with the ruler. You realize that we're only getting a narrow glimpse into a much larger manifold, and that there's a much broader reality than the one we can detect with our immediate senses. Right? If science has taught us anything, is that there's a lot more going on than what the naked eye or the naked ear, can pick up on. And it sure is interesting. The link between this and the child abuse scandals that seem to be coming out virtually every day at this point, is that there is a natural order to things. Keep the stopwatch in mind while I talk about this. There's a natural order to things, right? We talk about the alchemical journey on this pod all the time, that the real destination is the journey itself, and that the goal you think you're questing towards is just the North Star you navigate by. You don't ever actually get to the North Star. That's just how you orient yourself to reality. And the alchemical journey is something that the notion of sacrifice and of the alchemical journey are really similar ideas, right? This idea that in order to give your life meaning, you have to like decide what the thing is you want to focus your life on, and then sacrifice everything to that, right? The story of Jesus and Christianity is another way of articulating this idea of sacrifice. The pre-Christian peoples would just like they would cut up things of value, bulls or lambs, to sacrifice them on the altar to the gods as a way of acting out and reaffirming the notion of sacrifice. And so the natural order of things is for people to be born, to grow up, to have kids of their own, and then sacrifice everything on behalf of those kids. I think a good part of the epidemic of depression that's hit American society or all of Western society has to do with economics and demographics. If it was 100 years ago, we'd all have 5 or 6 kids, and 2 or 3 of those would survive to adulthood, and all this would happen by the time we were 25. But I think people are getting into their 20s and 30s and 40s with nothing to sacrifice for. And usually having a kid usually we'd have kids early in our life, but we saw a lot of propaganda in high school about the horrors of teen pregnancy. And so everyone's waiting until they're 40 to have the kids. And so I think that people don't have that North Star to orient their life around. Well, anyway, the natural order of things is for us to sacrifice everything on behalf of our kids. Everything that you are, all that you have, gets sacrificed to boost your kids as far up the ladder of success and forward in time as you possibly can. And then they do the same thing. But vampirizing kids or parasitizing them is a perversion, is the exact opposite of that, right? You're glorifying your own ego by consuming the life essence of children. That's what the adrenochrome conspiracy is all about. So it's interesting to me. When I think about this battle between good and evil, it's obvious to me that there is some kind of we are dealing, when we're talking about the elites and their insane Bitcoin possible Ponzi schemes and their blackmailing and sexual predations, it just feels like we are dealing with a perversion of the human spirit, like the opposite of the human spirit in some way, shape, or form. I don't quite know how to grapple with it, but that's what Tucker Carlson in his commentary on UFOs made me think of.
Well, I like how Tucker says that he doesn't have any TVs and that probably all these screens are terrible for us.
Yeah.
And,
well, how are we supposed to watch the Bruins beat the Maple Leafs again in the playoffs without TV? That's my only problem there. I do agree the TV is it's degrading. most of the content is just so bad. It's just a total forfeiture of your precious seconds of your life. Not the Bruins, though. It's fun to watch the Bruins.
Everything besides the Bruins. Yeah. What's your prescription for depression, Nate?
Obviously, Westerns, I think America definitely is plagued by an epidemic of depression. Like everyone I know, every person who's like under 40 is afflicted with a terrible depression. It's almost to a man or a woman. It is everyone. And I just mentioned, I think that's because people don't have something to sacrifice for. And I don't know, like, I remember I went through a terrible period of depression. I spent like 10 years. My salary was $2K, my take home was $2K a month, and my student loans were $1,200 a month, and I could barely afford to live even with roommates. And it was like just 10 years of that. And I thought I was going to be living like that well into my 50s. And I would try to appeal to people and explain to them that something is off about the American economy. Something is wrong because I can never be a winner in America. I either have to live out this meaningless life, or do something drastic like move other countries or set myself on fire. And I had trouble getting people to believe that there was something fundamental, that something was rotten in Denmark for a long time. And I was obviously in a state of terrible depression, and no one had any good advice. People had nothing. It was so frustrating. And so that is why I should now like to articulate my foolproof prescription for getting rid of depression. Has to do with the alchemical journey, of course. I mean, it's I think that it's a three-step process, and the third step is finding the thing that you are going to sacrifice everything that you are for. And that might be having kids, or it might be some other mission, but the only way to find out what the mission that you should be on is trips. And I mean this in the literal traveling trip. I also mean this in the hallucinogenic, psychedelic, mushroom trip kind of context. Because the alchemical journey is how you figure out what's worth sacrificing for, right? It's why we love stories of quests. And when you travel abroad, obviously, you have to kind of strip down your whole personality down to the studs. People are going to be speaking different languages. You're going to have no idea how to even go to the bathroom. And so you're going to have to really shake your Etch-a-Sketch, go all the way back to being a child and kind of grow up again, and then you can grow up to be a better version of yourself when you challenge yourself in that way by traveling abroad. So my first prescription to the hideously depressed out there is get on a flight. If you're American, I recommend Cape Town, South Africa. Cape Town abounds with natural scenic splendor. I never believed the idea that a place could pulse with magical energy until I visited the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southern tip of the African continent. That was, I've never seen a place that was more stunningly beautiful. But more importantly, Cape Town is one of these port cities where people are always coming and going. It's like your social group is like a gin rummy game or a go fish game. People are always leaving, so you're drawing new cards. The people of Cape Town are very welcoming to new people in their social groups, I've found. And the other thing about Cape Town, if you're American, no Americans ever go there. So it's like people like that you're American. They want to talk to you. Versus like in Europe, everyone's tired of Americans. We're always over there. But to get to Cape Town, you got to fly 10 hours across the Atlantic to Europe and then 10 more hours north to south across the African continent. But it doesn't really matter where you go. It just matters that it's not. It just matters that it's out of your comfort zone. So my number one prescription is get out of your home country. You should go somewhere where people don't speak your language, and you will be reduced to the court jester. You will be a fool, a child, and you'll have to rebuild yourself back up from there. And even though it won't be comfortable, it'll be a very instructive process, and you'll have the time of your life every time guaranteed. And of course, my second prescription is pretty much self-explanatory, but when you want to talk to the hot chick at the bar, oftentimes a common strategy is to like have a little alcohol to calm your nerves and make you bold, right? They call it liquid courage. And in that sense, like the alcohol is shutting down parts of your brain and making it so that they no longer function. But in so doing, it's sort of an addition by subtraction scenario where you could consider alcohol in that one narrow context a performance-enhancing drug. You would never consider alcohol performance-enhancing when it comes to driving a car. But when it comes to talking to the fairer sex, why, those ladies are scary. They're like sharks who can detect like a single drop of blood in a swimming pool's worth of seawater. And they'll detect that you're nervous, and they'll be disinterested as a result of it because you'll lack that confidence. And so a little bit of liquid courage can go a long way. And so similarly, a psychedelic drug can be a performance-enhancing drug in a narrow context. And that context is the demolition of the ego. Seeing the world, seeing reality with the costume of ego cast down is very, very instructive. But in order to get there, you have to take high quantities of psychedelics. You can't have a couple hilarious grams that you would take to go to the club with the lasers and the smoke. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about we're talking about just lying face down in your bed and your mind being totally elsewhere. That is really, really instructive. They call that a trip, and they call flying to Cape Town, South Africa, a trip for the same reason. You have to, for alchemical journey reasons. You have to. It's going to remake who you are as a person. So those are, and then of course the third already. The idea of going on trips is to determine what it is that you are going to sacrifice everything for, and only once you're oriented. And that might just be as simple as having a couple of kids and sacrificing everything for them, or it could mean starting a podcast in a Substack and trying to get ideas that you can see have real value out there and propagate those ideas as best you can, or something like that. You have to write your own story, and the only way to do that is a couple of alchemical journeys. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So all of you who suffer from horrible depression out there, these are your 3 steps. Travel the world, take a ungodly amount of psychedelics, and then determine what is the thing that you are going to sacrifice your entire being to accomplish. Because let's be real, our egos, our bodies, our identities, they are in the process of collapsing to the metal floor of the Death Star like Obi-Wan Kenobi's empty Jedi robes, right? Our bodies, our identities, our minds are all we're all fellow passengers to the grave, as Charles Dickens was fond of saying. And that's in having no purpose. As your body collapses out from under you, right? You want to make one move we want to do something to move the entire human race forward. And again, that could just be having kids, or it could be something completely different. Everyone has to find their own thing. When you think about, I already connected that to that's the natural order of things, is to sacrifice oneself, sacrifice everything one is, and that's how you can interpret the New Testament story, or any number of these old archetypical tales. They're all saying the same sort of thing. And so with that, I shall put a bow on my prescription for the chronically depressed. What do you think, Brian? Am I missing anything here?
Yeah. Well, being broadly speaking, finding something to sacrifice yourself towards definitely makes sense.
It makes the suffering make sense, right? This is JBP's constant perennial point.
Well, just in Asia, they're into chi development, and I just wonder. I mean, you could probably sacrifice towards like your own your own chi development, which
that sounds a bit like a sacrifice on the altar of ego, though, right? You're still dealing with yourself as some kind of a complex of mind and body there.
Well, what you'd realize is that like what you are is like awareness itself rather than like your body per se.
Okay,
so
there you go. Yeah,
you'd be sacrificing towards that end. But yeah, what you should do if you're depressed is start a podcast railing against our political elites is probably what we're talking about. I certainly mostly agree. I mean, I think doing drugs when you're depressed is a tricky thing. I'm
talking specifically about hallucinogenic psychedelic drugs, the non-habit forming ones. Because you could take up cigarettes, or you could take up pot smoking or alcohol drinking. None of those are going to help, right? You need like a specific kind of drug.
Yeah, well, if you have a chronic depression, well, I'm sure doing the mushrooms once is good if you have the chronic depression. But it's kind of easy to see like doing the mushrooms as like a solution in and of itself, rather than some kind of crazy experience to help you shape your journey. Yeah,
it's not the destination, right? Again, we're having I think that a lot of depression comes from confusion about what the actual destination is, right? And that's what you're sorting out by doing a lot of traveling. Or tripping. I guess I should say tripping is a better word, because it involves both kind of changes of location or person.
Well, anyway, I broadly like the idea, or I just do like the idea that you have to find something to sacrifice yourself towards. And that obviously is what gives you meaning. And not having kids to do it for is a kind of a bugaboo, huh?
Well, yeah, kids are the obvious one, right? You can do a huge boon to humanity by raising good kids. You can push the broken down Winnebago of humanity another foot up the hill, by getting out and pushing versus, being the rider. And, look, this is going to be JBP's point, but we're all going to be suffering. That is for sure. That's the one thing we cannot change, but you can make the suffering make sense by orienting yourself around some kind of a sacrificial goal. But yeah, I think until we there's a bunch of people in there who are 37 who have no house and no family and a job that pays the bills but doesn't get you anywhere long term. Is just a recipe for suffering, a recipe for depression. I think that probably having that picture of your wife and kids on your desk at work is probably pretty motivating, right? If you're just there just because you have to be, because otherwise you'll be homeless, it's really it enervates the. It enervates the mind, body, and spirit of all optimism, hope, and it just leaves you like a sad wreck of a person.
Yeah, I like it. So yeah, go out there and start a podcast, folks.
Yeah, but not too good a podcast. We don't want too much competition out there. Obviously we want System Failure to be number one.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Well, I guess, Brian, with that prescription for the chronically depressed, maybe we can put a bow on this week's edition of the podcast, and maybe it's time for me to go into my dance about how people should send us an email and let us know what they think of our ideas. Have you got a chronic depression on? Do you think that this prescription is promising or not so promising? Do send us a note at nop@substack.com. That's our little email address. And you can also read some delightful essays about the alchemical journey and the manifold glories of communism and a great many other things at nop.substack.com. So we hope to see all you all out there on the interwebs.
All right, see you.
And so long, everyone. Bye-bye.